thank you for the fantastic welcome. I have been testing, can you hear me okay? I've been testing this out on a few of you, and a few faces have come by and allowed me to see whether it was going to resonate. So one of the things that I discovered is a lot of you were saying, well, who are you? So I put this together this morning just to introduce who we are. Okay, we'll talk about what we do, but who we are. So these photos, these snapshots are taken, that was November when we were getting to the end of our year. So we had that put up on Times Square, the fastest growing cyber asset security vendor. So 100 million ARR in just under 5 years. So what the solution that we're providing is in demand. We have a large customer base, Fortune 500 customers. You can see just this week, there's our two founders, Nadir and Yevgeny. There is a NASDAQ News interview where if you Google that, you'll find that 10 minutes, and they will talk you through Armis, the journey they've been on, the plans, and the future. I'm 3 years into Armis myself. I run the solution architects outside of the US. Okay, so I clipped this off of our website. I think the key thing in the middle is Armis equals assets. Okay, we will discover, identify, classify, categorize, map out all of the assets automatically in your environment. We are not limited just to, I've had a lot of OT conversations here, but we work in all of those different sectors, BMS, work in energy, financial services. Everyone has this risk. So let's define the problem statement. So one of the things that the founders realized was going to happen probably 7 years ago when they met and started discussing this, and 5 years in the foundation of the company, was this explosive growth of assets that was coming. And in 2007, Apple released this, the iPhone. And that changed everybody's expectation of what could be done in a device. People, consumers, and all of those of us, technical folks in industry, started thinking about what can I automate, what process can I compress into these devices, whether it's security cameras, things running Linux. So we're no longer in a world where you can just walk around, cathode ray tube on the desk, beige PC underneath. Oh, I can see all of my assets. We haven't been in that world for a long time. If you look here, that is laptop servers today. Look at that. 2025, 4 billion devices. You will see this in your environment as well. You will know about this. Everyone I've been speaking to has been nodding. That is a problem. The nature of these devices. So if we think about IT devices, you can put assets, you can put management on those devices, network switches, but what about IoT? Not just cameras, the Internet of medical things. So we have a lot of healthcare customers. I know there's healthcare representatives here. And of course, a lot of OT. So those are unique devices. But then those devices will be on-premise, but what about the ones outside? A lot of your workforce is mobile now. They are working on the road, in cafes. They're SIM connected. It's much harder to control those assets. One of the things that I like to do when I'm talking, and you're giving me some time, is hopefully introduce you to something new, maybe teach you something. And one of my team who actually was involved, some of you might remember, IronPort, acquired by Cisco. The guy that introduced this to me was instrumental in building sender-based reputation filtering. And he, in the early days when we were trying to communicate where does Armis sit. So when you're a buyer, you need to think, okay, are you a SIM? Are you password protection? What does Armis do? Where do I mentally picture you? And he introduced us to this. So this is on the SANS Institute. If you go to the SANS website, you'll find the diamond model. And it is a model, it's not an Armis thing, it is a model that helps security buyers understand what they're paying for, so they don't keep repeating buying the same threat feeds where they've already got. And one of the things that, you'll see we've skewed it here deliberately to adversary, because one of the things that we noticed is there's a huge industry investment in looking for the needles in the haystack, okay, looking for the known bad. And that makes sense. That's a lot of SIMs and SOCs. That is the investment in SOC. But really, you need a more balanced investment in your cyber defense map. So if we put this model back to where it should be, we can see adversary at the top, and Armis sits there in that far corner infrastructure. That is what we do, and that will enable you not just to look for the known bad, but also to baseline and understand the known good. When you look at all of these frameworks, and I put RBI framework in there as well, all of them have one thing in common at the beginning, which is know what you have. The foundation, a fundamental thing that they ask you is know what assets you have, know what applications you have. All of the same. And that is one of the key things that Armis can do. So if we think about Armis as a platform of data, we start at the bottom, asset discovery, we will plug into your network, we will plug into your existing solutions via APIs and load that data on. You can then use that data and point it at questions. A use case is ultimately a definition of a problem, and those problems require various questions to be answered. And when you have a platform like this with this amount of data about your assets, you can point that data at questions and use that to answer them. So how do we do this? We will plug into APIs, so we can see here, we will take the data from your existing solutions, bring that via the cloud to quickly identify what those assets are. And we can plug in collectors into your network via network span. I've had some detailed conversations the last 2 days about how we do that. Very simple, we're completely passive. We will not actively scan your network. We will not put your network, your medical devices, your OT devices at any risk. A key unique and a differentiator from Armis, so 3 billion assets and counting. When I joined, that was under 1 billion. So this is a giant catalog of device behaviors. So this is how we are able to consume API-based data and network traffic and tell you, without actively scanning, we don't need to log into the device, and tell you what the device is. Because if it's a particular Samsung TV, a particular model, a particular release, we will tell you exactly what that is. When you know exactly what something is, you can understand what the vulnerabilities are, for example, what the risks and threats are. The highest level of question that any of you are going to be asking yourself is, and this again ties to the frameworks, is what do I have in my environment? So discovery of all assets. But then, so what? Well, what should I care about? Why would I care? So we will also layer on the risks and the gaps to those devices, those assets. And the final question is going to be, okay, so what am I going to do about it? What action can I take? So we can orchestrate those actions in your environment. We can plug in to your network, and we can update ACLs. Now, one thing, because I always get asked, can we do that? Yes, we can. One thing that I will always challenge back is, particularly in OT and medical environments, are you going to be the first person I've ever met who's going to, by an automatic rule, quarantine an IP address connected to an infusion pump, connected to a patient, and potentially do some harm, or harm to your production line? The answer is always no, followed by a laugh. So we can do that. Do people do that? Very rarely. It's the first two things that are really hard to do and that really matter. We break those questions down into a little bit more detail. Notice that accurate, complete asset inventory. Everything else rests on that. If you don't have that, if you don't know what is in your environment, you cannot manage the hygiene, the technical debt, what is out of date. You can't reduce the attack surface. You can't manage those vulnerabilities, and then you can't remediate them. Let's go another layer down now to the questions that are really going to matter to the IT administrators. So if I ask the question, are my endpoints up to date? Are they running all of my relevant EDR tool of choice? Is it turned on? Is it enabled? USB protection enabled? Of course, you could say, well, I'll just ask my EDR tool about that. It will tell me. And it will tell you where it's installed, it will tell you that, but it can't tell you where it's not installed. We will tell you connecting with Active Directory, with SCCM, we will correlate all of this information that you will have in different places in one place. That gives you power, it gives you speed, efficiency, it allows you to be more accurate. Another question, in this case, OT segmentation, although interestingly, in healthcare, of all of the three, IT, OT, medical, healthcare is the only space that has all three of those groups. There is OT devices, and those of you in that area will know that. So how do you manage segmentation? How do you protect those assets when they're agentless? Armis can enable you to do that. What does it look like? So we talked about what we can do. This is a couple of screenshots, us answering the question of what is my inventory list. This is what we look like. And if I clicked on one of those and drilled in and expanded it, this is the kind of detail, and notice that's just inventory. Okay, you've got network alerts, activities, vulnerabilities, risk factors, enforcements, applications, all of those. I can only show one screen here. So that is the level of detail that we can get to. Another question, where are these devices connecting to? We can map that out. We talked about the Google map of devices. You can, segregation. So those of you in OT will understand what a Purdue model is. It's a type of way to segregate and layer devices in the environment. Vulnerability management. Prioritization of vulnerability is one of the hardest things, one of the most difficult use cases to solve. Customers came to us and said, we can't solve it. We asked them what they needed. We built this exactly to match their requirements. I can talk to you after this exactly how we do that. We have saved companies millions they were spending with SIs, putting bodies on the ground to do that and never solving it. The first customer we went to, we solved it in 2 weeks. Finally, this will resonate for the OT audience. Slightly over time, but I know we were 4 minutes early before. That second and third point, that is an issue between OT and IT. And when those two become friends and they understand each other's worlds, then I think OT will improve their cyber resilience and IT will understand some of the pain and pressure on OT. I'm going to sign off there. I will let you read that. Thank you very much for your time. Armis is a serious player.